Now we're going to bring in the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, from Des Moines, Iowa. Good morning to you, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Plenty to talk about this morning. Of course, we're going to start with the situation in Libya, which you called on Friday nonsense and a mess. You have clearly are looking at the prospect of running for president. We had the chance to ask Haley Barbour this question and Mike Huckabee, who might run against you, how they would handle the situation differently if they were the commander-in-chief. How would you have handled it differently?
Well, first of all, before March 3rd, I would have said, let's use indirect forces. Let's not use Americans at all. Let's find ways to get Egyptians, Moroccans, Iraqis, Jordanians, help the rebels win, but not use American forces. After March 3rd, when the president said Gaddafi must go, I would say to you, we have to use American and allied air power, and we have to combine it with advisors and with air control teams from Arab-speaking countries. But our goal has to be to defeat Gaddafi. What I think is nonsense is the president's constant indecision. For example, your report just now, that's not a no-fly zone. They're killing tanks. Tanks don't fly. At least I've never seen a tank fly. So they're clearly trying to bring air power to bear against ground forces. But it's not a humanitarian mission. But it's a mission to defeat Gaddafi.
But even as Secretary Gates had said, any sort of no-fly zone, Mr. Speaker, of course, does not just include aircraft that take off, but it includes anything that would fire upon other forces or fire into the air. So wouldn't tanks be a part of that?
Well, I've never before heard a no-fly zone include everything. If it includes everything, then this is an air campaign to defeat Gaddafi's army, and we're going to destroy artillery. We're going to destroy tanks. We should be going after his supply trucks. If you look at any map of Libya, there are very long roads in between those towns. Right. They're very far apart. So we should be destroying all of his logistics system and making it impossible for him to sustain his power outside of Tripoli. That's not a no-fly zone. I disagree with the Secretary and his definition.
Well, I want to have you clarify some things, because you've been slammed in the press over the past few days for saying some things inconsistently. Of course, you were in Greta the other night to clarify some of those issues. And I want to say more broadly, doesn't it sort of underscore how difficult the situation is? You've amended what you said about using air power before, now saying not using a no-fly zone. Others have said that you said we should demand an intervention, and then did a 180-degree turn, so we shouldn't demand an intervention. Clarify some of those, and doesn't underscore the changing problem on the ground there that the president has to deal with.
Look, if you ask me, should we jump in the lake, I'd say no. If you say, gosh, we're already in the lake, should we start swimming, I'd say yes. The fact is, before March 3rd, I thought we should not use American power. After March 3rd, when the president said Gaddafi must go, I said, you have to use American power. Then they said, we're not going to use it to defeat Gaddafi. And I said, this is nonsense. The only purpose of using American power is to defeat Gaddafi, drive him out of office, and have a new government. And you still, to this day, have an administration which is utterly confused about what it's doing. I haven't heard the president come out again and say Gaddafi must go. So what are we doing there? If all we're trying to do is a humanitarian zone, that could go on for 20 years.
All right, Mr. Speaker,
let me just ask you. Drive Gaddafi out of office.
The president is giving a nationwide address on Monday. What does he need to say to the American public, and can he get the American public, should he get the American public on board? I mean, we're already stuck in this thing, whether we like it or not.
That's right. You just said the key thing. We're already stuck in this. The president should say, for reasons that he believed were essential to the United States, not to the Arab League, not to the United Nations, to the United States, that he has concluded we have to defeat Gaddafi. He should say that we're going to do what it takes to drive Gaddafi out of power, that we're going to do it using local allies and American air power and European air power. And he should say that he's going to ask Congress to provide a supplemental to pay for it, because the Pentagon cannot take this. They're already fighting 2 wars. They can't take this out of their regular budget. And he should say, I am consulting and working with Congress. That would be a fundamental change for him. It would be clarity about purpose, willingness to be responsible for the money, and a willingness to work with the American Congress, not the Arab League or the United Nations.
All right. There are also some efforts to try to defund this in Congress. We'll ask the former Speaker about that.
Also, yeah, he's up early with us this morning out there in Des Moines. We're going to have more with the former Speaker of the House. He's set to talk to the freshman House GOP with all the conflicts going on. We're going to find out what he has to say to them this week as well.
Good morning, everyone. We are back, and we are talking a lot about Libya and what's going on throughout the entire Arab world. We're speaking with former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who is joining us from Iowa. You know, one government official, let's shift gears for just a second. This is something we've been talking about all morning long. This guy from the CBO has this plan to balance the budget, and he wants to tax how far Americans drive. Seriously, should the government have access to your odometer?
Let's ask the former Speaker of the House. I'm sure he has something to say about this. Newt, so driving in a car, if you drive a lot, you're going to be taxed more than the grandma who goes down to get milk once a week.
You know, you'd have to work in Washington to come up with an idea like this. The answer to balancing the budget, and I helped balance the budget for 4 straight years, is to cut spending. When we balance the budget, we actually cut taxes to get economic growth. We need to go back to 4% unemployment. If you put all those Americans back to work, they'd leave unemployment, they'd leave Medicaid, they'd leave food stamps, they'd go back to paying taxes because they'd have jobs. You'd begin to balance the budget. We do not need a tax increase. And the idea of having access to your odometer to find out how much you've driven, you really would have to be totally out of touch with the American people to propose something like that.
Speaker,
I deeply oppose it.
This mileage tax would be in addition to the gas tax that we already pay. You know, I'm just wondering here, is this maybe a backdoor way to spur along the government, to spur along more building, more infrastructure, to try to push people to take public transportation?
It could be. I have no idea why they do it. I think it's a bureaucrat sitting in an office who probably took Metro, thinking up a new way to tax everybody else who drives. I think the American people will reject it totally. I'm opposed to tax increases. We do not have a problem of being undertaxed. You have a problem of being overspent, and the way you deal with that is you tell the politicians, quit spending.
This week, Mr. Speaker, you're going to be speaking to some of the freshman GOP in the House of Representatives. A lot of new faces, a lot of new voices, bringing some voices that are even critical of some of the House leadership. What are you going to talk to them about this week?
Well, I talked about the lessons of 1995-96 when we began to balance the budget. We reformed welfare. We began to cut taxes. And I'm going to suggest to them they need to be bold and they need to appeal to the American people. I think there's a way to get Obamacare repealed, but it requires the American people to get involved. And I think if we get the American people involved, we can change Washington very rapidly.
Mr. Speaker, there's an effort ongoing in the House right now to defund the program in Libya. What's going on there? Where do you see that going?
Well, I would oppose that. Look, once the American president commits American troops, I think that we ought to try to help and make sure that our young men and women in uniform have the backing of the Congress. We don't want to send a mixed signal to the people who are risking their lives for America. I think we can debate policy with the president. I think that this is frankly going to be over fairly rapidly unless the administration is really, really committed to being incompetent. There's no reason Gaddafi can survive for any length of time. And I think we should support American troops when they're in the field because they're risking their lives for you and me, and they don't need politicians squabbling behind them.
Absolutely. I think we can all agree with that. Mr. Speaker, always great to see you here on Fox and Friends. We thank you for getting up early and being out there. Busy day in Des Moines. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Take care.
And we'll wait just a matter of weeks to see if he decides that he is running for presidency in 2012.